Alright guys, so the first week of Cosmic Crucible Season 9 has now passed, and we have some great information to share. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how you can climb through the ranks of Cosmic Crucible in Season 9 based on what we've already seen in the live server. Is it a defense-heavy meta? Is it an offense-heavy meta? Can you decide how you want to play your roster and still be meta? I think so. I think you're going to enjoy this video, and if you do, please make sure you leave it a like, share it with your friends, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Without further ado, let's talk about some Cosmic Crucible. Alright guys, so before we talk about the stages, we gotta talk about the global rule, because this rule will affect every single stage. This rule is called the guiding hand, and it will affect both the offense and defensive end of the game. So in offense and defense, Wakanda characters are going to count as Illuminati. This means characters like Nakia, Black Panther 1 Million, the original Black Panther, Killmonger, all those characters are going to count as Illuminati, so they will be getting the benefits of anything the Illuminati characters give. So Hank Pym gives speed up, well now he's a replacement for OG Shuri to make that team spawn with speed up. If we have Black Panther Shuri, she's going to be giving damage to Illuminati members. Well, then the Wakanda and the War Dog characters are going to be getting that extra damage as well. Does this play a huge role in the meta? Certainly not once we have 5 pieces of the Illuminati team with or without Captain Britain. The 5-piece Illuminati team without Captain Britain being the original Iron Man, we have Black Bolt, we have Black Panther Shuri, Hank Pym, and Mr. Fantastic. That 5-man team will be better than any sort of hybrid with the War Dog or Wakanda characters, because each of those characters bring something interesting to help the more interesting members of the Illuminati. Black Panther 1 Million, sure, he can come in, he could ult, he could give a couple buffs to the Black Panther Shuri. That's somewhat interesting, but in the same note, Iron Man is going to be giving crit and crit damage as well. Black Bolt will be giving 50% life. You have Mr. Fantastic will be doing assists every turn, which I guess could be a Okoye, but Mr. Fantastic is going to let anybody do the assists, and he does so much more damage. So once you have the full 5 Illuminati members, it's not a question if you want to do any sort of Wakanda / War Dog hybrids, and certainly if you have Captain Britain, that's not really an option unless you're trying to make Captain Britain a plug-and-play character, which we'll see the results of that. He does seem like he could absolutely play a pivotal role in making some very tricky current defense teams even trickier. Then we're going to have the usual stuff. So on defense, all characters are going to gain 20% max health and 10% damage, and after each completed attempt, they will gain 1 exhaust. The enemies will. Cancelled combats do not gain exhaust. So when you go ahead and you quit a match in Cosmic Crucible, that will not put exhaust out. It will not exhaust your team that you try to use either, and then you're only going to have 2 attempts instead of 3 attempts. Normally, if you want my just general guidance when it comes to Cosmic Crucible, unless the match has gone horribly wrong, the enemies are going to come in with absolutely monstrous cooldowns, and I haven't taken down any single enemy, I'm probably going to leave the matchup. Unless it's like that. If it's like that, well, then you might have to redo it. But every single time you use one of your attacks and you don't at least weaken the team or take the team out, it's a nightmare. It's very bad. Which is why you're going to need to know what to use on defense. And we're going to seek to answer those questions right now. So stage 1 is called Full House. We've actually seen this rule in a couple seasons ago of Cosmic Crucible, so we're very familiar with it, and we have some really strong ideas that you can implement right away. Let's read it out first. On offense and defense, striker characters with ability block gain 50% damage, and when attacking a character with ability block, apply bleed. Let's talk about this for a second. 50% damage in our game of Marvel Strike Force is a very big lump sum. However, if you're ability blocked and you're getting that damage, it does mean you're using your basic attack, which for 99% of the characters is really inoptimal, and it's going to hamper you a lot. So we're not going to really see a lot of strikers in this room, unless like Dormammu, who if he's ability blocked, he'll get that extra damage, plus he'll get a bunch of speed bar for being ability blocked. Then we have Raider characters. So on turn, they're going to clear ability block and heal self for 10% of max health. That's a big heal, but it's also really disruptive in a lot of key matchups. Take, for instance, the Extreme X-Men or the Extreme X-Men with Dormammu team, where you really need to land an ability block on Rogue and on Forge that you're controlling both the buff clear and all those buffs given from Forge, and the taunt and the turn meter we want from Rogue. So if we make both Forge and Rogue a Raider, this is going to exponentially make this team more complicated to take out. It's tough to give up those ISOs, but it's well worth it to get yourself some sweet defense victories. As far as counters go for that extreme team I just talked about, the Masters of Evil team does fall flat because Masters of Evil does not have what stops this room from really countering that, and that's going to be a trauma. So when I consider the extreme team I'm no longer going to be relying on ability blocks. So if I want to use my Master's Wheel, I'm more looking at Moonstone to control the enemies with a stun, and maybe I want to throw Nova in over Absorb Man, because Absorb Man is not really doing that much there. And then maybe I also want to have another stun. Maybe I want to throw a Weaver in there, or maybe I want to throw one of the new characters in there, like Mr. Fantastic, though he doesn't stun until turn 2. Just the kind of thinking you need to do when you're tackling these Raider characters that you normally cover with an ability block. That is actually my preferred defensive team this season for this room, is going to be the Extreme X-Men with Dormammu. The reason I like that is because it's a budgetary team that is still an A+ defense. And the next team I'm going to talk about that's going to lead into the Skirmishers is a little bit too valuable in offense for my liking. So, this skirmisher aspect of this. Skirmisher characters on successful attack will apply ability block. It says to primary target, but it's actually to everybody hit. The reason this is so powerful is because, well, let's reverse engineer it first. Hey, this applies ability block to everybody, but if everybody's a raider, they'll try and drop it off. Unless we can compound it with like a trauma. One of the strongest teams you can put on defense in this room is going to be your Superior 6. And make your Green Goblin classic a skirmisher. I know, we're wasting a lot of ISOs and ions for this, but it's a super powerful defense or offense if you're trying to use it in that regard. So why is it very powerful? Well, Green Goblin Classic is going to rip everybody's buffs off. He's going to apply trauma to them, and if he's a skirmisher, ability blocks across the board. This absolutely devastates what your enemy is trying to accomplish in that room for sure. Other notable trauma characters that will also be putting out ability blocks would be maybe Firestar. Firestar puts trauma out on her ultimate to all adjacent targets, and if she is a skirmisher, it's going to follow that up with an ability block. So that's a powerful tool for New Warriors, though I don't think New Warriors gets much play. As far as counters go to the Superior 6, well, all the regular counters would still work. We have a Skrull Doom team with a couple other characters that go fast, do some mechanical goodies. That will still work because we get to go before the enemy. But if we want to really up the security of a Superior 6 team, we can go ahead and slap Black Knight with that team, and that is absolutely devastating. So what that's going to entail is we're going to have Black Knight, Green Goblin Classic, Kraven, Lizard, and Doc Ock. That's going to be our 5-man team. So we don't get the offense up from the Spider Slayer, but we don't really need it because we have so much control. It's crazy. And of course, Black Knight is an absolute unit, just wrecking face. If you want to know how to beat that team, it's not easy, and it's going to cost you a lot. You're looking at Apocalypse variants who are going to get ahead of that Black Knight, get him under control, absorb the damage from the Green Goblin Classic. Of course, we're going to have our Apocalypse in this version is actually going to stop the Green Goblin Classic from landing any of his stuff because of course, Apocalypse passive, reducing the focus of enemies on their first turn. And that's going to be a very, very big pull because a couple of the other teams we're going to talk about here, especially for people that own Mephisto, is going to be absolutely nutty. So stage 1 is 100% going to play a big role for people in this Crucible season, especially those who want to go the more defensive meta. And Superior 6 Black Knight is going to be an absolute nightmare for that. Alright guys, stage 2, Fatigued. Kind of like my voice if you couldn't tell. Well, this is going to be another super impactful room where it's going to be, you want to be super defensive oriented? Do you own Mephisto? Do you want to be offensive oriented? And how is that going to play with what you put on defense after that? I think this room is actually going to favor offense at the end of the day. So, ultimate abilities were going to cost 2 less to use. There's so many characters that get to ult turn 1 with this rule, which is super impactful. Think of a character like Vulture, who can come in here, do a very quick rewind. Or take, for instance, if we were to come in here with Doom, he can ult turn 1. Omega Red can ult turn 1. Skrull could ult turn 1. So for a defensive-oriented person, Skrull is a super interesting character because he could come in here and he can ult turn 1. But who would we put with him? Well, let's look at the rest of the rules of this room to get through that. When using alternate ability, you're then going to gain slow. Ooh, double-edged sword. So I use my ultimate, but now it's going to take me a long time to get to my second ability. Except on ally turn, characters with slow are going to gain assist now. So in this instance, let's say Skrull were to ult, he gains slow, and then other characters who take their turns are going to call him in for an assist, and he's going to apply a nasty disrupt, and he's going to do a lot, and I mean a lot of damage. So who do we want to pair with our Skrull? Well, we can pair 3 pieces of Hive Mind and a Pre-Taunt in there. Just make sure you keep the ratios accurate so that we do have 2 heroes, 2 villains, and Carnage should be on the team. Because when Skrull ults, he's going to give so much turn meter, those Hive Mind characters are going to go, they're going to call in assists from our Skrull, and it's going to get ugly for our enemies very, very quickly. But hold the phone, because now we can mirror match that. So if you're an offensive-oriented player, you could actually use your Hive Mind Skrull, but instead let's bring in Emma. Emma has no buffs. Emma reduces the speed of the enemy characters. Well, then your Skrull is going to ult turn 1. Your Hive Mind characters are going to get so much speed bar, they're going to then run roughshod over the enemy. That's what happened to me in my first match of Crucible this week, and I was really surprised at how efficient it was. But if you're doing that mirror matchup, you have to have something else on defense. What I will say, though, is based on the efficiency my opponent threw up when he did that mirror matchup, I'm not sure if I could out-efficiency, say, if Darkhold was in that room, or something a little bit less interesting, but has Safeguard defense up on spawn. Something like that, maybe Infinity Watch, something along those lines, not in this room, but just kind of on defense in a different room in lieu of something else, is very interesting. But there is another very scary character out there in the wild, and only more are starting to populate, and that's Mephisto. So Mephisto, when he becomes empowered, he technically uses his ultimate. That's going to put exhaust on you, and it's going to put exposed on the 2 highest damaged of mythic characters. The reason this is scary is because then Mephisto has slow. When his allies take a turn, that's going to call Mephisto to an attack, and he gets crazy defense buffs when he does that, which is basically going to make him immune to one of his biggest counters, the Cabal team. So not only is Mephisto going to use his actual ultimate turn 1, but he's also going to protect himself turn 1, or turn 1 of his first ally, which is very, very, very scary when you're trying to face these teams. What it basically does is it protects Mephisto from Cabal, even with a very, very mid-team like Black Order. Black Order, so original Thanos with 3 Black Order members, he's going to get speed up if you have Proxima there. He'll get 75% speed bar if he has Ebony Maw there, and he's going to do a very quick basic attack. That will call in Mephisto to do an attack, and all of a sudden, Mephisto has so many defensive buffs, your regular Cabal counters don't stand a chance. But they'd also have to survive the Mephisto ultimate, so it's kind of all over the place. I really, really like that. It's interesting. It kind of makes you have to do 2 burn attacks into Mephisto, like we normally were doing anyway, because you really don't want him to use that empowered ultimate, giving himself slow, which will then protect him on the next attack. So that is like for your very, very developed roster option to try and get through it. I think we're going to see a lot of Mephistos in this room, just because you can use a budgetary team like Black Order to capitalize as much as possible. And then there's rooms like stage number 3. Every season has to have these sort of gimme rules. Because if all 6 rules are super impactful in the meta and how our current offensive teams affect the defensive teams, or vice versa, well, then it would just become too hard. It would become a slog, and Crucible would quickly get stale. So Twisted Blade, kind of a boring rule, but we need those, right? So on offense and defense, all characters with vulnerable unsuccessful hit will apply a vulnerable up to a maximum of 5. When attacking a character with vulnerable, apply bleed. So you kind of just want to put a regular team here. I see a lot of people putting their Old Man Logan team here. They get a little bit of benefit for that bleed, although we'd prefer them in a different room. But the reason to put something like Old Man Logan here is because he is so impactful in his own right, and you'll have different options to pull teams like Cabal, pull Apocalypse, that sort of thing, that it makes sense to put a very strong team in this room where any other team is kind of just walked over, right? So this is why you're going to see a lot of Old Man Logans in this room, or just a lot of gimme teams like Spider Society, which are just going to claim a Secret Defenders plus a character that goes with them over Doctor Strange, whether that be Cosmic Ghost Rider or Lizard. I've seen some people use Dawkins, though I don't really trust that one. So this is going to be kind of one of those lukewarm room rules, which is fine. We need that. What I would not suggest putting in this room is going to be your Infinity Watch team. There's a much more interesting room for those guys a little bit later on. As far as countering the teams that go into this room, so we're talking about our offensive defense balancing, whatever counters the team normally in any other room is going to work in this room too. There's going to be very few teams that are going to win or lose because of vulnerables. Like think of Spider Society. So with vulnerables, on successful attack, they apply a vulnerable. Well, Spider Society, they kind of cancel that out in their own right, because PWB is clearing vulnerables as the match goes on. So you don't really want to build into this room too much. You just want to put a very strong team in here and make use of the other rooms to stretch out your enemy's roster as much as possible. And in that same vein, you want to take out whatever team is in this room with as little committed of your offensive roster as you can muster. Stage 4, Vibranium Enhanced. As the Crucible season goes on, I think we're all going to find that Stage 4 is the most impactful stage when it comes to winning and losing Crucibles, especially when we start facing off against Illuminati teams, especially when we start facing off against Illuminati teams that have Captain Britain in them. So on offense and defense, all characters when using basic attacks will generate ability energy, and ultimate abilities will cost +2 more ability energy. So just so we're on the same page here, if a character spawns with their ultimate available, it will not be available turn 1. It'll be available for them on their second turn. This completely neuters a lot of our very strong counters. Now, we haven't even seen the full Illuminati team on defense yet, or on offense, but in preliminary testing, Superior 6 were the only team that could really stand to them and potentially one-shot them. However, that is heavily reliant on Green Goblin Classic's ultimate going off before the enemy gets to take a turn. If he can't ultimate turn 1, then you're really stuck taking down a single character. You're going to lose steam, and the Illuminati team will beat you. So that is going to be your highly defensive option for this room, is going to be your Illuminati team, especially with Captain Britain in there. There's a little bit more to the room, though. Not that it's going to affect very much. So on defense, all characters using special abilities gain defense up, regeneration, and offense up. As far as other teams that go in here that are not going to be as costly as, say, putting in your full Illuminati team here, well, we have some great options. What you really need to do is you need to think of what team is countered by the enemy's ultimate abilities. Black Knight with the Spider Society team would be a good option here, because the best counter to Spider Society is going to be your Secret Defenders, and that's going to struggle pretty hard against a Black Knight version, especially because then Miss Marvel Hardlight can no longer rewind the enemy team, but also Superior 6. Because once again, we're heavily reliant on that Green Goblin Classic Ultimate taking all the buffs away from the enemy team so we can get ahead of them. So if we want to keep our Illuminati for offense, I really do like the Black Knight Spider Society team here, which of course means we can't have Black Knight with Superior 6 on defense. But that's okay, right? Because if we wanted to go offensive meta, we want to keep our Superior 6 for offense, and Spider Society with Black Knight is a really good shout out for a secondary team. So that's going to be your two options that are going to be the most fruitful in my opinion. Black Knight with Spider Society if you're offensive minded, or Illuminati if you're defensive minded. And I think the Illuminati are going to be extremely difficult this season. Looking forward to finding any other solution for them as we go on. And then we have stage number 5. I'm going to equate stage number 5 a little bit to stage 3. The health insurance stage is going to, on turn, clear all positive effects from self and heal 10% of that character's max health for each positive effect removed. So if you have offense up, speed up, defense up, deflex, death proof, whatever the case may be, when it's that character's turn, they're going to lose all their buffs. They're going to heal a lot, but they're going to lose all their buffs. This is a really strong attack against your offensive teams that are going to rely on, say, offense up. Your Superior 6, they rely on offense up from Slayer. Your Masters of Evil, they rely on offense up from the Kang doing the special. Your Pegasus members really rely on that defense up and those deflex, and they're going to lose them on every single turn. So any sort of offensive team that loses their buffs is going to lose a lot of potency here if they rely on that for survivability and for damage. Some teams that will actually do decent here, oddly enough, the New Warriors, who are one of my least favorite teams, when they take their turns, they're not reliant on an offense up, but they will lose their dodge. So then they're going to be vulnerable, more vulnerable, on their second attack. But if the enemy goes first, then it's not that big a deal. So as far as defense goes in this room, I don't think this is a room you want to overstock, because then you're just going to pull something like Cabal. Cabal starts with Safeguard. They're going to get their damage off, and it's still going to work out fine. No, this is going to be your Infinity Watch room. This is going to be an amazing room for Infinity Watch, because whenever the enemy tries to take it down with a budgetary Pegasus counter, or they try and take it down with a Masters of Evil, they're quickly going to find out they are losing steam without those offensive buffs, without that speed up, and they are super vulnerable to the Infinity Watch team without those death proofs or those deflects. So this is going to be a pretty basic room, but it really levels the playing field with our non-Crucible teams that we can put on defense and our Crucible teams that we use on offense. For the record, Pegasus, Masters of Evil, they can still work against the Infinity Watch team. It just gets a lot uglier, a lot faster, and it's going to be a pretty deciding factor in some matchups depending on how big your enemy's Infinity Watch team is or how big your offense teams are. Last but not least, guys, we got Stage 6, Dulome's Destruction. This was a room constructed by Dulome himself after winning the first Cosmic Crucible Content Creator Clash, or the 5 Cs, if you will. And this is a pretty interesting room, so when using an ultimate ability, generate 1 ability energy for each enemy. Now, we've seen this in action, and at the end of the day, if you overstock this room with, say, a Mephisto or the Illuminati, all that's going to happen is we're going to either burn it, like do a burn attack into it, and pull those abilities without using any ultimates of our own. So you're not getting any extra energy, you're just wasting your attacks. Or we're going in there to one-shot you, and we're going to control you right at the gate. So I think when Dulome constructed this room, he was thinking Illuminati, maybe he was thinking any sort of Mephisto team, but like I said, if we just do a smart burn attack, we're going to be okay, and if we do a big punch down, then we're going to be okay as well. As far as like the best teams that go in here, well, recently with different Old Man Logan counters, with different Skrull counters, we've started to really pull that Tangled Web to sort of be a assisting force with Apocalypse. So anything that Tangled Web was kind of in control of countering would go really good in this room. So a budgetary team that I really like on defense in this room is going to be your Darkhold. Now, my opponent in my first round of Cosmic Crucible did something pretty interesting. He put Darkhold on defense with Dakin, so if I went into stealth with Tangled Web, the Dakin would pop off and do a lot of damage and a lot of control effects, and Quicksilver, another threat that can't be rewound. So if we were to separate the Morgan Le Fay and the Dakin, you can't rewind both of them, then it could get a little sketchy on what happens in that matchup. It is a budgetary team. It will definitely get beaten by stuff like the Masters of Evil, which is fine because then that team is not being used elsewhere. Kang is not being used with, say, the Cabal team, and we're giving a lot more cover to our different teams that we have, mostly in stages 1, 2, 3, and 4, assuming we put Old Man Logan in stage 3. The non-budgetary team for this, well, it's hard to say because if I were to put Mephisto in this room, I don't think it elevates him at all. I think that he would actually just get burnt 2 times like he normally would, and then the opponent would come in with new warriors. Because if you're not doing any ultimates, this room isn't actually doing anything to the enemy team. So it kind of becomes a nothing burger if you play it really smart. Now, for those of you who don't, I've been saying the word burn a lot. If you don't know what burn means, it means you go in to do an attack, you pull whatever abilities you want the enemy to do. Maybe you do some attacks if you know that you can get a kill on a certain unit, or you pause the game after you've taken the amount of enemy turns you want to take. After, say we went into Illuminati, we pulled the Shuri special and ultimate, we pulled the Hank Pym special and ultimate, we pulled the Captain Britain special and ultimate. Hey, pause the game. And we're either going to let it time out, or maybe our team has died, but we never intended to win. That's what you call a burn attack. Once it happens, they put exhaust on the enemy, they lose 20% of their stats, and we can go from there, which makes the team a lot easier to beat. This is going to be a balancing act you need to take care of, whether you are being super defensive minded or super offensive minded. If you and your opponent are both super defensive minded, you should consider doing some burn attacks just to make sure you get through the match very cleanly and with good efficiency on the second attack. Because if somebody takes a risk and they don't do well, and they do what we talked about a little bit earlier, they actually back out of the matchup instead of leave it and do a quick cleanup, that's going to be heavily, heavily, heavily in your favor. So that's it for the 6 stages, guys. Let's go have some final words. Alright guys, so my final thoughts on Season 9 of Cosmic Crucible. Is it going to be super defense meta? Is it going to be super offensive meta? Is it going to be easy to climb through the ranks? I wish I could tell you. The truth of the matter is, you guys, the community, are always so much smarter than any single content creator. After about 2 to 3 weeks, there's going to be so many different people coming up with very interesting offensive teams, very interesting defensive teams, and making clever use out of certain defensive rooms. So make sure you keep an eye out for your favorite content creators. Hopefully, yours truly is among that list, and you'll find some great solutions. As it stands right now, I prefer a very balanced approach to Cosmic Crucible. I like to have 3 strong defensive teams. So I like to have a really strong Black Knight defensive team. I like to have Old Man Logan on defense. And I like to have, if I have Mephisto, a Mephisto team. If I have no Mephisto, a Skrull team. And if I'm getting really, really sick and tired of facing off against other defensive people, I'll start punishing the people around me by having 4 defensive teams. Old Man Logan, a Super Skrull team, a Mephisto team, and a really strong Black Knight team. Illuminati, when they're finally here in the picture, that's going to shake everything up. We might have 5 insanely difficult defensive teams, and then it's going to be an absolute slog. We're going to be using very clever burn attacks, and it's going to be pretty complicated, but I hope to guide you through that journey, because I do think Cosmic Crucible has the best, or at least the funnest rewards in the game, being those diamonds, those training materials, which is my favorite thing to do. I find leveling characters to be so much more beneficial with all my gold than to be buying any amount of Crimson gear from the store, because the levels from level 90 to level 100 on any given character, that's 40% stats. That's right, guys. You heard me correctly. Leveling a character from 90 to 100. It's 20% from 90 to 95. It's another 20% from 95 to 100. That is insane gain. So the training materials we can get from Cosmic Crucible, absolutely love it, because those are pretty rare. Those are very rare. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you leave it a like, subscribe to the channel, of course, share it with your friends. And something very interesting that we get to do, well, we talked about Dulam winning that last content creator Crucible Clash, whatever it's called. He got to make a room. Well, I won the second one. So I did win the second one, and now I'm going to be able to craft a room for Season 10 of Cosmic Crucible, and I would love to know your ideas in the comment section below. I've heard a lot of cool stuff already. We've been hearing about like a buff clear across the board, inverted speeds, energy from certain origin types, connecting certain tags. I'm very partial to anything that we can incorporate that is around family, so like a daddy daycare room or a Mother's Day room, something like that, because I'm a very family-oriented guy. But I would love to know your opinions, because what I'm going to do at the end of the day is I'm going to take down maybe the 10 coolest suggestions. We're going to make a different video. I'll let you guys vote on it, both on YouTube and on Twitch. And whatever wins, that's what I'll be asking the developers to do. But once again, guys, hope you stay happy, healthy, and have fun. And I'll talk to you next video. Bye for now. That's it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Stay happy, healthy, have fun, and I'll see you in the next one.